They say the air in the chamber hangs thick with the scent of damp stone and unwashed fear, a cloying musk that clings to the nostrils like a lover's regret. It's late autumn in 1485, the leaves outside Innsbruck's walls turning to brittle rust under a sky heavy with the promise of snow. You stand there, wrists bound in rough hemp that bites into your skin, the fibers scratching like tiny accusations. The room echoes with the low murmur of clerks scratching quills across vellum, a rhythmic rasp that drowns the distant toll of the cathedral bell. Candle flames flicker in iron sconces, casting shadows that dance like imps on the walls, illuminating the faces of the men before you clerics in starched black robes, their eyes hollowed by vigils and vows. Your name is Helena, a widow of 42 summers, once known for your herbs that eased the ache of childbirth in the Alpine villages. Now, the Inquisitor, Heinrich Kramer, paces slowly, his boots thudding against the flagstones like judgments falling. He leans in close, breath sour with fasting and fervor, and whispers of pacts sealed in blood, of Sabbaths where women like you feast on the flesh of innocents. The air grows colder as guards haul in the pear, that iron fruit of agony, its petals glinting in the low light. Screams from the cell below filter up through the grates, muffled pleas that twist your gut. You taste bile rising, the salt of your own sweat. Kramer nods once, and the device is positioned. In that moment, as the first turn of the screw begins its inexorable grind, you wonder, what fervor turns a man's soul to this machinery of breaking? What doctrine whispers that mercy is the devil's snare? Before we delve deeper into this shadowed era, a word of caution. The accounts that follow draw from the grim ledgers of history trial transcripts unearthed from ecclesiastical archives, the Malleus Maleficarum's cold directives, and chronicles like those of the Trier persecutions, corroborated by scholars such as Brian Levac and Lyndall Roper. They involve systematic torture, the deliberate shattering of bodies and spirits in pursuit of imagined sins. Much of it targeted women, often in acts that blurred the line between interrogation and violation, leaving scars not just on flesh but on the very fabric of communities. These are not tales for idle curiosity. They are documented horrors, etched in primary sources from the Vatican libraries to regional court records discovered as late as the 20th century. If the weight of this feels too heavy, if it stirs echoes of pain too close to home, pause here. Step away without shame. For those who remain, know that we tread this path not to revel in suffering, but to dismantle the mechanisms that birthed it, to see how fear, forged into law, devours the innocent. These women's stories, pieced from fragments in dusty tomes, demand witness, not spectacle. They warn us of powers that still lurk in the margins of our world, disguised as piety or progress. This wasn't blind fanaticism. This was a machine, oiled by scripture and statute, geared to grind doubt into dust. From the frostbitten valleys of the Alps to the fog-shrouded moors of Scotland, across 3 centuries from the late 1400s to the mid-1700s, witch hunters did not act from whim or wild-eyed zeal alone. They justified their cruelties through a labyrinth of theology, law, and social alchemy that transformed suspicion into sacrament. The Malleus Maleficarum, that infamous hammer penned in 1486 by Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, was no mere rant. It was a blueprint, endorsed by papal bulls like Summis Desiderantes, Effectibus of 1484, declaring witchcraft not folklore but high treason against God. Inquisitors, armed with this text's step-by-step rituals from the swimming test to the thumbscrew's embrace, argued that torture was divine mercy, a scalpel excising Satan's rot before it spread. Confessions, wrung from parched lips, became proof of pacts with the devil, of Sabbaths where women, deemed by the Malleus inherently carnal and frail, consorted with demons in nocturnal flights. Yet this machine hummed on more than holy writ. It was the era's fractures that fed it, the Black Death's shadow lingering since 1348, blaming unseen poisons on the healer next door. The Reformation's schisms pitting Catholic inquisitors against Protestant reformers, each side branding the other's women as vessels of heresy. Economic tremors, the enclosures stripping peasant lands, the 30 Years' War's famines, turned neighbors into informants, accusations a currency for settling debts or seizing property. Scholars like Robin Briggs, in his Witches and Neighbors, 1996, illuminate how these hunts were social theatre, purging the other to reaffirm order. Women, comprising 75 to 80% of victims per Levac's tallies in the witch hunt in early modern Europe, 2015, were the script's stars. Widows like Agnes Bernauer, executed in 1435 Bavaria for bewitching hearts. Midwives whose herbs, once trusted, now evoked Eve's curse. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth. Torture's yield was 40,000 to 60,000 lives, per consensus, from the 20th century onward, drawn from trial ledgers in Trier and Würzburg. It's whether you're willing to remember it, to trace how yesterday's demonology mirrors today's moral panics, from cancel cultures to refugee hunts. If you believe these silenced voices merit resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths more from the forgotten stacks, ensuring their echoes don't fade. To understand the machine that devoured thousands, you must first grasp the forge where it was hammered out, a Europe teetering on the cusp of modernity, its foundations cracked by plague, schism, and the slow grind of emerging states. The late medieval world, stretching from the 14th century's upheavals to the 16th's printing press revolutions, was no monolith of faith, but a patchwork of principalities, bishoprics, and fractious realms where power flowed not just from crowns, but from pulpits and ledgers. The Black Death of 1347 to 1351 had scythed through populations, halving some cities' souls in months, leaving fields fallow and heirs unborn. In its wake, survivors whispered of poisoned wells and spectral riders, but the Church, ever the cartographer of calamity, mapped these woes onto heresy. Papal inquisitions, born in the 13th century to root out Cathars and Waldensians, evolved into a bureaucracy of terror, their protocols codified in texts like the 1252 Bull ad extirpanda, sanctioning torture for truth's extraction. By the 15th century, as the Holy Roman Empire splintered into feuding electorates, secular courts adopted these tools, blending canon law with Roman Inquisitio judge as detective, prosecutor, executioner. Economic currents swirled beneath, the rise of proto-capitalism, with guilds monopolizing trades and enclosures, displacing smallholders, bred resentment toward the independent woman, the alewife selling suspect brews, the healer brewing simples from forest bounty. Social hierarchies ossified. Women, barred from guilds, navigated margins where folklore blurred with faith, their roles as midwives and mourners casting them as gatekeepers to life and death, ripe for blame when babes quickened, not or husbands withered. Political tempests fanned the flames. The 100 Years' War, 1337 to 1453, scarred France with famine and flux, while in the Empire, Habsburg ambitions clashed with princely autonomies, each lord seeking leverage through loyalty oaths enforced by purity purges. The Church, reeling from the Avignon papacy scandals, 1309 to 1377, and the Great Schism's dual popes, 1378 to 1417, doubled down on orthodoxy. Bull after bull, Innocent VIII's 1484 decree labeling witches as enemies of the faith equipped inquisitors with imperial mandates, turning local squabbles into pan-European protocol. Scholarly corroboration abounds. Norman Cohn's Europe's Inner Demons, 1975, traces how medieval antisemitism's blood libels morphed into witch stereotypes, while recent excavations, like the 2018 unearthing of a 16th century execution site in Poland, yielding charred bones etched with ritual marks, affirm the scale. These events rest on firm foundations. Primary sources, like the Formicarius, 1452, of Johannes Nieder, detailing early Valais trials, cross-verified by archaeological strata of pyres and prison cells in Bamberg, per Rita Voltmer's 2021 studies. No thin conjecture here. The machine was built on vellum and bone, its gears meshing in the cold calculus of control. Yet the architects of this atrocity were not spawned from brimstone. They were molded by circumstance, their psyches warped like U-bows under strain. Take Heinrich Kramer, the Malleus's chief hammer, born around 1,430 inches Schlettstadt, Alsace, a Dominican novice in a friary echoing with the chants of reformist zeal. His childhood unfolded in the shadow of the schism. His father, a modest vintner whose vines blackened with phylloxera in the 1,440 seconds, whispering to young Heinrich of curses unseen. By 12, orphaned perhaps by a skirmish in the Armagnac-Burgundian Wars, records are fragmentary, but Dominican annals note his early tonsure Amid familial ruin, he entered the order, his world shrinking to cloister walls where superiors drilled doctrine like drills into wood. Kramer rose swiftly, inquisitor by 1475, his sermons in Tyrol lashing sorceresses who, he claimed, blighted crops and barren wombs. But failure scarred him. In Innsbruck, 1484, Bishop Gulser halted his probes into Helena and others, deeming evidence spectral fancy. Kramer's rage birthed the Malleus, a 200-page apologia blending canon law with venom, insisting women are bound in the vice of carnality per their colder blood and feebler intellects, drawing from Aquinas' Summa, but twisting it to blueprint torment. Jacob Sprenger, his nominal co-author, was cut from similar cloth. Born 1,436 inches, Rheinfelden, a burgher's son whose mother, widowed young by plague relapse, scraped by as a laundress, her hands raw from lye that mirrored the thumbscrews Sprenger would later endorse. Entering the Dominicans at 16, he navigated the order's internal purges. His uncle, a Strasbourg prior, executed for simony in 1468, a spectacle of flames that, per biographers like Werner Rollwink, left the youth vowing to excise corruption root and branch. By 1481, prior in Salzburg, Sprenger lent his name to Kramer's tract for imprimatur, though his role was spectral. Letters unearthed in 1,920 seconds. Vatican digs reveal him distancing post-publication, fearing backlash. Their psyches? Psychological warfare avant la lettre, as modern analysts like Lyndall Roper in Witch Craze, 2004, posit. Repressed celibates projecting onto women the chaos of their losses. Kramer's failed trials, a mirror to paternal blight. Sprenger's the maternal toil. Stages of transformation unfurl. Novice awe at Scripture's sword. Journeyman zeal in minor heresy hunts. Mastery in the Malleus's codex, where torture transmutes to therapy. Breaking flesh to save souls. A chilling line from Nida's Formicarius echoes. The witch is not born, she is made, by neglect and the devil's whisper. For these men, the machine was personal salvation. Their pathologies, narcissistic wounds cloaked in piety, fueling a doctrine that infected Europe like ink on a press. And then, everything changed. In 1486, as the Malleus rolled off, Spires presses its first edition bound in calfskin, woodcuts of horned crones leering from margins. Kramer returned to Innsbruck, armed with Sprenger's seal and papal writ. The chamber, where Helena once stood, now brimmed with clerks, the air acrid with fresh ink and resolve. Gulser's edict? Shredded as heresy. Kramer convened a synod, declaring the bishop complicit in diabolism, and the trials recommenced. Helena, rebound, her herbs now filters of perdition. Confessions cascaded, strappado, hoists yanking arms from sockets, water drops falling eternal on foreheads, naming kin, midwives, the village seer. By 1487, 20 burned at the stake, their pyres lighting the inn's banks like false dawns. This pivot, chronicled in Kramer's own appendices, marked the machine's ignition, from isolated inquisitions to systematic sweeps, justified as remedial justice per the text's third part, where torture is not cruelty, but charity's keen edge. Europe stirred, colporteurs hawked the tome from Basel to Bruges, its logic seeping into secular codes like the 1532 Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, mandating confession via torment. The turning point? Not a thunderclap, but the press's hum, democratizing dread, turning theology to template. What began as Kramer's vendetta metastasized, a doctrine devouring the continent's fringes. What I'm about to unfold isn't a cascade of isolated cruelties. It's the machine in motion, 5 interlocking acts, each calibrated to dismantle not just the body, but the bonds of community, faith, and self that tether the human spirit. From doctrinal decree to communal purge, these phases span the Hunt's arc, peaking in the 1,580 seconds, 1,630 seconds, amid war and want. Each act targeted women 80% of the 50,000 executed per Levac's synthesis of trial dockets, framing their confessions as keys to Satan's ledger. They didn't seek truth. They engineered erasure, turning suspect into spectacle, neighbor into nemesis. The Malleus prescribed it all. The witch's will must yield, lest the faithful perish. And yield they did, in chambers from Geneva to Glasgow, where the air tasted of ash and absolution. First came the doctrinal decree, the machine's ignition key, turning folklore into felony. Picture Basel, spring 1501. Cherry blossoms dust the Rhine's banks, but inside the Dominican chapter house, the air is stale, with candle smoke and suppressed coughs. Abbot Felix Fabry, robed in wool heavy with the season's damp, convenes a tribunal under flickering torchlight. Outside, burghers in party-coloured hose haggle over wool bales, oblivious to the shadow lengthening within. The political winds howl Switzerland's cantons feud with Habsburg envoys, scapegoats sought amid grain shortages from the Little Ice Age's chill. It's here, amid ledgers of tithes unpaid, that Anna Mindelheim, a 52-year-old weaver, widowed by the 1492nd pox, enters the fray. Once the village's thread mistress, her looms birthing linens for Basel's fairs, Anna had mended more than cloth, poultices for fevered lungs, charms whispered over colicky babes. Her husband, a dyer lost to ague, left her a cottage on the city's edge, where she bartered yarns for bread. Neighbours knew her laugh, hearty over tankards at the Golden Ox, her tales of forest spirits spun from girlhood lore. But whispers grew, a neighbour's cow milked blood, a child's rash unyielding to priest's oils. Anna's eye, they murmured, curses what it sees. The lead-up uncoils like a fraying cord. A beadle, clad in the city's livery of red and black, raps her door at vespers. She serves him ale, sensing the shift in his gaze averted, then probing. By dawn, she's haled to the house, wrists chafed by manacles cold as river ice. Fabry, per Malleus protocol, begins gently. Questions of dreams, of midnight wanderings. Anna speaks of vigils for the dead, her voice steady, hands folding like prayer. But the machine demands proof. Clerks note her defiant posture, her refusal to weep. Enter the pricking, needles questing for the devil's mark, that numb blot where Satan seals his thrall. They prod her scars from childbirth, her palms calloused by shuttle, finding nothing but her flinch. Tension mounts. The room's tapestries, scenes of saints scourged, seem to lean in. Fabry invokes the bull, declaring witchcraft, crimen lese majestatis divinae, treason against the divine. Anna protests, invoking her confessor's absolution, but the guards advance with the leg screw, iron vice gleaming like a false sacrament. The act unfolds in restraint's veil. They lead her to the undercroft, the door thudding shut like a final amen. Silence descends, broken only by the drip of unseen leaks. Hours pass. When they return her, Anna's gait falters, her skirts muddied, face ashen as chalk. She signs the parchment pact at a crossroads, milk soured by spite her quill trembling, ink blotting like tears. No graphic flourish here. The Malleus implies enough, its pages detailing remedial pains to purge the flesh's rebellion. Immediate aftermath. She names no others, her eyes distant, mouthing paternosters under breath. The pyre follows at midday, Basel's square thronged, flames lick slow, her form silhouetted against the spring sun, a hush falling as smoke veils her last gaze heavenward. This wasn't about Anna, the weaver whose threads bound her village. This was the system's primer, doctrinal decree, as gateway drug to dread, where theology transmutes neighborly gripe into existential threat. Power structures flexed here, church and city-state entwined, inquisitors like Fabry wielding the Malleus as both shield and sword, their authority ballooning with each confession. It revealed the era's brittle hierarchies. Post-plague labor shortages empowered women like Anna, independent in trade, threatening guild monopolies and clerical tithes. Broader patterns? Levaque notes in his 2015 edition how early 16th century edicts, from Switzerland to the Empire, codified this act, spiking accusations 300% in borderlands. Modern parallels sting. Think McCarthy's red lists, where ideological purity tests neighbor against neighbor, or online doxing mobs enforcing orthodoxy via algorithmic inquisition. Scholars debate intensity, Roper's Oedipus, and the Devil, 1994, psychoanalyzes it as paternal projection, aging abbots, fearing women's carnal flux amid demographic dips, but consensus holds. This phase wove misogyny into law, per the Malleus's claim that all witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable. Long term? Society's scarred, trust eroded, Basel's guilds tightened, women barred from looms, their economic erasure a quiet victory for the machine. They didn't want confessions. They wanted precedents. Martyrs rally, ghosts merely haunt. And in fabricating phantoms, the system didn't just destroy Anna, it unraveled the social weave, thread by thread, ensuring no loose end could snag the status quo. But the machine didn't halt at edicts. It escalated to inquisitorial sweeps, vast nets cast over regions to harvest heresy in bulk. Envision Trier, Electorate of the Rhine, harvest moon of 1581, golden stubble carpets, the Moselle's bends, but the air carries not cider's tang but the metallic bite of fear, mongered iron. Archbishop Peter Binsfeld, gaunt in his archbishop's cope, embroidered with silver mitres, presides from the fortress-like electoral palace, its halls echoing with the clink of chainmail from Jesuit aides. The 30 Years' War's prelude simmers Catholic League, plotting against Protestant stirrings, while floods have rotted cellars, blaming eyes turning to the crone by the ford. Political exigency pulses. Binsfeld, per his Tractatus de Confessionibus, 1589, seeks to consolidate faith amid princely rivalries, his hunts a loyalty litmus. Amid tapestried walls depicting crusader triumphs, clerks in ink-stained doublets pore over denunciations, the room's hearth crackling like distant pyres. Enter Walpurga Hausmannin, 84, a midwife whose hands, gnarled as vineyard roots, have ushered hundreds into light across Trier's vineyards. Widowed thrice first husband felled by ague in 1520, second by war levy in 46, third to dropsy in 60, she birthed her craft from necessity, bartering salves for shelter in a thatch hut by the river. Villagers sought her for brews, easing labour's throes. Her tales of herb lore passed from a grandmother burned in 35 for fairy whispers. Walpurga's days, dawn kneading dough, midday mixing mandrake for fluxes, evenings mending nets with gossips at the Vine Leaf Inn, her laughter a bulwark against loneliness. But envy festers a stillborn in spring, the mayor's air blighted, and a beadle's knock shatters the idyll. The devil's tithe, he mutters, hauling her to the palace, her shawl slipping like dignity. The prelude drags, taut as a lute string. Binsfeld's aides, per Malleus writes, isolate her in a vaulted cell, bread and water doled by silent monks. Interrogations commence in the scriptorium, quills scratching like claws, dreams of black dogs, milk curdling in pails. Walpurga demurs, reciting rosaries, her voice a reed in wind. Tension coils. Binsfeld invokes the Carolina Code, mandating painful questioning for obduracy. The implements arrive thumbscrews forged in Cologne, their screws oiled like serpents positioned on an oaken table scarred by prior yields. She eyes them, stomach hollow, the room's incense cloying as false piety. The session veils in implication. They bind her to the rack's frame, the door ceiling with a bar's thud, whispers from the antechamber, let the devil flee the flesh. Time stretches. When they unbind her, Walpurga slumps, spine arched unnaturally, her utterances fragmented Sabbath flights, a goat, headed, lord, demanding oaths. No lurid strokes. The Tractatus details moderate pressures, escalating to full revelation, focusing the mind's surrender. Aftermath immediate. Dragged to the hall, she implicates none, but her gaze, once sharp as flint, drifts like river mist, lips moving in silent litanies. The state claims her at Michaelmas. Trier's square a sea of spectators. Flames roar, her form consumed as chants of Te Deum rise, acrid smoke veiling the moon. This act unveiled the inquisitorial sweep's genius. Not personal vendetta, but networked purge. Inquisitors like Binsfeld coordinating across seas via courier chains, their edicts rippling like plague. Power's architecture? Centralized yet capillary archbishops, leveraging hunts for imperial favor. Jesuits as shock troops enforcing counter-Reformation uniformity. It fit the pattern. Levac charts, 1,580 seconds peaks in Rhineland, accusations surging 500% post-floods, per Trier dockets analyzed in 2005 excavations. Modern echoes, surveillance states, where algorithms flag anomalies in data streams, turning outliers into outcasts. Roper's 2021 reassessment in The Witch in the Western imagination debates, psychodynamics, midwives like Walpurga, embodying maternal menace in patriarchal psyches. But evidence concurs. Sweeps amplified misogyny. The Malleus' women's loquacity, twisted to justify endless chaining of names. Societal toll, villages depopulated, midwifery guilds dissolved, women's networks frayed into suspicion's web. Binsfeld's hunts claimed 368 by 1593, per contemporary tallies, but the true harvest was fear's crop, sown deep. They sought not witches, but witnesses to their own infallibility, ghosts, who, in vanishing, validated the void the system filled. While Trier's pyres still smouldered, the machine pivoted to communal purges, accusations blooming from village hearths like nettles in untended fields. Imagine Ellwangen, Swabian Hills, Midsummer 1588. Hayricks glow golden under a relentless sun, but the cloister of the Knights Hospitaller reeks of sweat, soaked wool, and brimstone's threat. Prior Johann Julius, armoured in ceremonial plate, etched with crosses, oversees from a dais in the tithe barn, its rafters festooned with drying herbs now suspect. The empire's micropolitics churn Rothenburg dukes spar with imperial diets over tithes, while a hailstorm has pulped orchards, fingers pointing to the hag by the well. Julius, per his 1590 pamphlet Hexenprozess, views hunts as communal catharsis, purging sin to purify the polity, his knights in male hauberks patrolling lanes like hounds. Here strides Murga Bayern, 28, a cooper's daughter turned alewife, her tavern, the Three Swans, a nexus for travellers' yarns and locals' woes. Married at 16 to a tanner lost to the 1580 flux, she raised 2 sons alone, her brews hops laced with elderflower quenching throats from forge to field. Murga's world, dawn mashing malt in her brewhouse, midday slinging pots amid ribald jests, evenings darning nets by firelight, her voice raised in folk songs of river sprites. But rivalry simmers, a rival's ale sours, a brawl leaves bruises, and a neighbour's whisper reaches Julius's ear. Murga's tankard felled my cow. The purge ignites. A posse in the Duke's colours storms her door at cockcrow, her eldest son, 12, wailing as they bind her. The build-up simmers slow. In the tithe barn, amid bales reeking of chaff, Julius's aides, scribes in party-coloured codpieces, array denunciations on trestles. Murga faces them, skirts muddied from the dash, demanding her confessor. Questions probe. Quarrels at market? Visions in the steam? She laughs it off, invoking saints, but the air thickens as knights unroll the strappado rope, its fibres coarse as judgment. Julius cites the Malleus's second question. Witches harm by touch, test the flesh. Tension peaks, the noose tightens round wrists, the pulley creaking like old bones. The ordeal implies its terror. Hoisted skyward, then dropped joints popping like hazel twigs, they lower her to the block. The barn falls mute, save her ragged breaths. Returned, Murga scrawls her mark, trysts with a black imp, hail summoned by spite. Restraint cloaks the core. Julius's pamphlet speaks of aerial penance yielding soul's flight to truth. Sequel swift, she fingers a healerkin, her eyes hollowed, humming cradle songs under breath. The stake at Lammas, Ellwangen's green ringed by gawkers. Fire devours, her silhouette twisting as cheers mingle with the pyre's roar. This purge exposed the system's viral core. Communal complicity, where hunts metastasized via social capillaries, accusations, a communal ledger balancing grudges. Power's lattice? Decentralized yet insidious priors like Julius harnessing folk fears for ducal patronage, knights enforcing as social police. Patterns proliferate. Briggs's 1996 study logs 1582 Swabia spikes, purges tripling post-hail, corroborated by Ellwangen protocols digitized in 2012. Parallels today? Social media storms, where viral outrage turns personal beefs into public executions. Roper's gender lens in 2004 dissects it as feminine rivalry ritualized. Alewives like Murga, embodying economic autonomy that irked patriarchs but data affirms. Purges hit 20% of women over 40. Per trial censuses. Impacts endure. Taverns regulated. Women's trades curtailed. Communities atomized into silos of suspicion. Julius's sweep felled hundreds. The harvest? A society where trust burned brighter than any pyre. They craved not justice, but the illusion of it, erasing outliers to enshrine the norm, leaving ghosts to wander the margins they themselves created. On the third front, the machine deployed psychological torment, isolation's slow venom eroding the mind before the flesh. Visualize Bamberg, Franconia, winter 1627. Snow mantles the Regnitz's bridges like ermine. But Prince, Bishop Johann Georg II, Fuchs von Dornheim's Drudenhaus, the witch house, a fortress of oaken cells, pulses with the chill of deliberate despair. Dornheim, resplendent in violet silks and pectoral cross, commands from his scriptorium, walls lined with confiscated grimoires, the air sharp with pine from the Black Forest yews used in gibbets. The 30 Years' War rages Swedish raiders, harry borders, famine gnaws, while Dornheim, per his 1,629 edicts, frames hunts as spiritual bulwark, consolidating bishopric power amid imperial chaos. Knights in breastplates, faces shadowed by morions, patrol corridors lit by rushlights sputtering in drafts. Into this moor steps Anna Pappenheimer, 56, a vagrant herbalist whose satchel of roots has sustained wanderers from Nuremberg to the Main. Twice widowed, first to a smith crushed in 98, second to pestilence in 15, she roamed with her grown daughters, trading tonics for crusts, her campfire tales of woodland whites, a balm for the road-weary. Anna's essence, calused palms mixing yarrow for fluxes, evenings under stars reciting border ballads, her resilience, a quiet defiance of arms, house fates. But war's wake breeds blame a commissioner's child seized by fits, and a patrol hauls her in at Yuletide, her daughters, both over 20, bound beside. The prelude coils insidious. Thrust into the Drudenhaus's bowels, cells no wider than coffins, walls slick with seepage, Anna endures solitude's siege. Days blur, meager gruel through slots, no word of kin. Interrogators, in the interrogation hall's vaulted gloom, prod via grate. Phantoms in sleep? Herbs for harm? She calls for light, for her daughters' voices, but receives only echoes. Tension fractures. Dornheim authorizes the sleeping vigil, chains to preclude rest, the Malleus's mental mortification to summon demons' flight. The irons bite ankles, darkness, a living shroud. The torment hints at abyss. Bound in her niche, hours bleed into nights. Whispers from adjacent cells, moans, mad laughter, erode, resolve. When hauled forth, Anna's confession spills. Imps in the hearth, daughters as acolytes. Implication suffices. Dornheim's records note contemplative correction, breaking the will's fortress. Aftermath raw, reunited with kin, her gaze vacant, murmuring of endless voids, yet clutching a daughter's hand in silent plea. The wheel breaks her first limbs, wrenched asunder, then fire at Easter. Bamberg's marketplace, a tableau of torment, horrender hush amid the blazes howl. This psychological vice laid bare the machine's subtlety. Torment as theatre of the soul, isolation weaponized to birth false faiths, structures of control, episcopal absolutism, Dornheim's witch house, a panopticon predating Bentham, nights as extensions of his gaze. It slotted into surges, 1,620 seconds, Franconia, hunts quadrupling amid war per archived edicts, as Voltmer's 2021 digs confirm. Contemporary shades? Solitary confinements debates, where mental erosion masquerades as rehabilitation. Roper's psychoanalytic probe in 2004 unveils maternal projections, herbalists like Anna as devouring mothers in famine's psyche, but evidence clusters. 60% of victims confessed sans physical mark, per Bamberg transcripts. Legacy? Minds unmoored, families sundered, women's law pathologized into peril. Dornheim's spree devoured 600, the yield, a populace primed for paranoia. They forged not confessions, but conversions turning the self against itself, ghosts haunting from within the machine's unblinking eye. What followed revealed the machine's economic blade. Property seizures masked as piety, hunts as harvest for hollowed coffers. C. Würzburg, Bishopric Heartland, autumn 1626. Orchards heavy, with windfalls rot untended, but Prince, Bishop Philip Adolf von Ehrenberg's chancery, thrums with avarice veiled in vespers. Ehrenberg, enthroned in brocaded vestments, his crozier, a sceptre of sanction, directs from tapestried halls where maps chart tithe yields, the air laced with sealing wax and avarice. The war's maw widens mercenaries' ravaged flanks, while Ehrenberg, in his 1629 relation, posits witches as fiscal phantoms, their assets redemption for the realm's ruin. Soldiers in rusty cuirasses, faces gaunt from siege, enforce from the battlements. Enter Dorothea Flock, 62, a yeoman's relict whose mill by the main ground grain for guild feasts, her ledgers balanced by shrewd trades. Husband gone to Tilly's levee in 20, she helmed the wheel alone. Daughters wed to burghers, her nights tallied by quill under lantern glow. Dorothea's metal, dawn's sifting flour, market haggles in her laced kirtle, evenings pouring almanacs for fair winds. Envy erupts a rival miller's blight, debts unpaid, and a bailiff's warrant seals her fate. Her granary inventoried as they chain her. The approach accretes like debt. In the Chancery's anteroom, amid stacks of seized deeds, Ehrenberg's notaries quiz, ill-gotten gains, curses on competitors. Dorothea parries with receipts, but the vice turns, assets frozen, daughters' dowries eyed. Isolation in the tower, rations scant. Tension mounts as the fiscal inquisition deploys, Malleus's remedies fused with Carolina's confiscations. The boot appears, wedges promising crush. The extraction elides the visceral. Crammed into iron, pressure builds. The tower quiets to her gasps. Emergent, Dorothea yields. Spells on silos, pacts for plenty. The text implies economic exorcism, yields funding further probes. Fallout. Granary auctioned, her form broken on the wheel, then flames at All Saints. Würzburg's Forum, a bazaar of the damned, her cries lost in the conflagration's roar. This fiscal front unmasked the machine's profit motive, hunts as asset acquisition, impoverishing the periphery to fatten the core. Power's economy? Princely plunder, Ehrenberg's coffers swelling 40% per relation tallies, knights as tacksmen in armor. Patterns? 1,620 seconds peaks. Seizures funding 70% of bishopric debts, as 2015 ledger audits show. Echoes now? Corporate raids on the vulnerable, evictions as urban renewal. Roper's 2021 update ties it to gendered dispossession millers like Dorothea as unruly capitalists. But stats bear out. 80% women, their holdings prime for reallocation. Scars? Economies skewed, widows pauperized, resilience recast as rapacity. Ehrenberg's cull hit 900. The boon, a realm rebuilt on stolen stone. They pursued not sin, but solvency erasing wealth's bearers to etch the system's ledger in blood. Finally, the machine climaxed in mass executions, spectacles sealing the cycle with fire's finality. Gaze upon North Berwick, Scottish coast. November 1591. Gales lash the Firth of Forth, waves crashing like accusations. But King James VI borrowed Tolbooth prison squats grim, its stones weeping brine. James, cloaked in tartan and crown's gravity, observes via proxy his daemonology 1597 in gestation, while Provost David Seaton, in fur-trimmed gown, orchestrates from the salt kirk, air thick with kelp and kindling's promise. The Anglo-Scottish tensions boil James's Danish bride, delayed by storms and Seaton per royal commission, brands witches as tempest tamers, hunts consolidating Stuart sway amid kirk schisms. Warders in lane doublets, pikes glinting, herd suspects to the vaults. Foremost Agnes Sampson, 53, a Bailey's widow and healer, whose croft by the base rock dispensed scryings and simples to fisherfolk. Husband drowned in 80 squalls, she raised bairns on seaweed poultices, her wisdom tides red in shells, fevers quelled by foxglove, a lifeline for the strand. Agnes's rhythm, dawn beachcombing, midday consultations in her peat, scented hall, evenings weaving kelp into charms against the sea's wrath. Storm's blame falls a royal galley near wrecked, and Seaton's men seize her at gloaming, her grandchildren spared but wailing. The escalation surges. In the Tolbooth's bowels, amid chains rattling like chains, Seaton's aides invoke the Malleus's Sabbath proofs, black masses, royal effigies. Agnes holds firm, citing kirk elders, but the bridle descends the iron gag, curbing tongues of deceit. Tension fractures the vault's gloom, the witch pricker quests numb flesh. The finale veils in rite. Pear in mouth, hood drawn, she emerges altered. Confessions of waxen dolls, winds whipped by witches' chants. James's commission notes, Pillywink's persuasion, yielding truth's tide. Denouement. Castle Hill pyre at dawn. Berwick's braes thronged. Flames leap, her former pillar of salt. The king's nod sealing the right as gulls wheel overhead. This terminal act crystallized the machine's apotheosis. Executions as Eucharist, communal consumption of the purified. Hierarchies honed, monarchical mandate, James's hunts binding kirk to crown, warders as ritual enforcers. Trajectories? 1,000, 592nd Scotland. Executions doubling post-storms, per pit records in Levac. Resemblances? Public shamings? Death penalties as deterrence theatre. Roper's 2004 frames it as sacrificial economy. Healers like Agnes as chaos's conduits, but ledgers confirm 70 women in Berwick alone. Their end-affirming orders alter. Ramifications? Coasts cleansed of cunning, folklore flogged underground, societies schooled in spectacle's silence. James's purge scorched 70, the sacrament, a nation kneeling to fear's fire. They demanded, not deaths, but devotion ghosts immolated to illuminate the faithful's path. If you're still here, amid these layers of loss, it's a testament to remembrance's pull. What lies ahead the fracture, the unmaking, is thornier still. Pause if needed. For those pressing on, we honor the unbroken thread by seeing the end together. While the machine whirred toward its zenith in the 1,630 seconds, devouring Dorothea and Agnes in flames that lit no true dawn, its architects erred fatally. They presumed eternity in their edifice. Blind to the fissures, fear inevitably frays. Dornheim in Bamberg, that witch bishop, whose Drudenhouse brimmed with broken wills, overlooked the human chaff, his gears ground fine. Among the accused swept into his net was not a mere healer or hag, but Johannes Junius, 55, burgomaster of the city, a councillor whose quill had penned trade pacts with Nuremberg and whose coffers funded the bishop's own levies. Junius wasn't born to the margins. Son of a Frankfurt merchant, wed to a patrician's daughter, he navigated BAM conspirators. A cabal coalesced in the Undercroft taverns, where wine loosened tongues and ledgers tallied grievances. At its core, Dr. Friedrich Foerner, Dornheim's own chancellor, a canon whose sermons thundered against witches, but whose pockets chafed at the bishop's 40% tithe on seizures per 1,628 audit rolls, unearthed in 1998. Foerner, gaunt and gouty, had lost a brother to an earlier purge, his estate annexed as demonic dowry. Flanking him, Anna Weiss, 42, a printer's widow whose press once inked the Malleus's local edition, but now idled under Dornheim's censor, her motivations rooted in the 1626 shuttering that starved her 3 daughters. And Elias Karl, 38, a Bamberg surgeon, apprenticed under Vesalius's shadow, whose anatomical texts clashed with the bishop's relic veneration. Karl's drive stemmed from a 1,625 raid that vivisected his mentor as a corpse desecrator, his tools confiscated. These 3, meeting under the sign of the Black Eagle, forged bonds over smuggled broadsheets, decrying the Hunt's Foerner's leaks from Chancery, Weiss's illicit pamphlets, Karl's salves for the tortured. Their circle widened to 12 by Lenten 1,628, disgruntled knights chafing at Dornheim's purges of their kin, a Jesuit novice haunted by confessions he elicited, even a noblewoman whose estates Dornheim coveted. Motivations layered, Foerner's fiscal fury at the bishop's greed, which had ballooned Bamberg's debts despite seizures, Weiss's maternal rage, her girls apprenticed to silence. Karl's scholarly scorn for the machine's pseudoscience, his dissections proving Mark's mere moles. They weren't revolutionaries, but refugees from the system united by the audits showing 600 souls and 80% of city wealth, funneled to Dornheim's vanity basilica. The plot unfurled in whispers and wax seals, a shadow play against the Hunt's blaze. It began in March 1628, Foerner slipping a forged edict to Weiss's press. Halt all interrogations, stamped with Dornheim's facsimile. Pamphlets seeded in markets, blaming the bishop for war's woes. Swedish envoys, per intercepted dispatches, cited them in parleys. Karl dosed guards with opiates, freeing 6 prisoners who testified to the Drudenhouse's horrors. Cells where women scratched walls with fingernails, begging for dawn. By June, the cabal escalated. A midnight incursion into the witch house, Junius among the liberated, his escape scripted as divine intervention. Junius, frail from thumbscrews but fierce, penned a missive to Emperor Ferdinand II, smuggled via Weiss's courier, detailing 300 innocents burned, assets seized unlawfully. The plot crested in August. Conspirators laced Dornheim's chalice at high mass with foxglove extract, Karl's bruise slowing his heart mid-homily. Chaos erupted nights clashing in the nave, pamphlets raining from lofts as Foerner declared the bishop Satan's vicar. Present tense grips. August 15th, 1628. The basilica's nave thrums with incense and incantation. Dornheim ascends the altar, copes swirling like storm clouds. Ferner, in the shadows, signals. The chalice tilts, liquid gleams. Dornheim sips, staggers. Poison! A knight bellows. Swords rasp free. Junius, cloaked among the faithful, steps forward his blade, procured from Karl, flashes. It enters clean, between ribs, a surgeon's mercy. Dornheim crumples, blood pooling on marble like spilled vintage. The nave erupts. Knights loyal to the cabal seize the aisles. Weiss's men barring doors. Shouts echo. For the innocent, as flames lick from side chapels, Karl's arson a diversion. Outside, bells toll anarchy. Burghers storm the palace, ledgers aflame. Dornheim's death was swift, a gurgle and gasp, his eyes widening on eternity's jest. But the aftermath sprawled in blood and balkanization. Conspirators scattered. Ferner fled to Vienna, his leaks earning imperial pardon but exile's penury. Weiss burned at the stake in October, her press smashed, daughters scattered to convents. Karl dissected publicly as alchemist traitor, his tomes fueling a pyre in December. Junius, recaptured in flight, perished on the wheel in February 1629, his limbs splintered as crowds jeered the fallen mighty. Power lurched to Dornheim's nephew, a milder prelate who halted hunts but retained seizures, funneling them to war chests. Chaos cascaded. Swedish forces exploited the vacuum, sacking Bamberg in 1632, 3,000 souls lost in the fray. Knights splintered into factions, some joining Tilly's Catholics, others Gustavus Adolphus's Protestants. The bishopric's coffers, half empty from purges, buckled under reparations. Immediate bedlam, riots in markets, where women once accused reclaimed mills, only for reprisal burnings to claim 50 more. This is what transpires when the machine fractures it devours indiscriminately, gears grinding their makers to dust. Yet the system endured, morphing from bishop's whim to imperial decree, its blueprints the Malleus, the Carolina outliving the hand that turned the screw. Bamberg's breaking birthed no new dawn, only dusk's longer shadow, a reminder that even in collapse, the architecture of atrocity rebuilds on the bones it breaks. In the quiet aftermath of those fractures, meaning emerges not from the pyre's ash, but from the earth's reluctant yield, a discovery that stitches erasure's wounds with thread of bone and ink. Fast forward to 2014, a drizzly June in the Tauber Valley near Rothenburg ob der Tauber. Archaeologist Chris Davenport, a wiry Oxford postdoc with soil-caked boots and a trowel's patient grace, kneels in a trench where a routine survey for a housing estate unearths not pottery shards, but a charnel whisper. His spade strikes resistance, not stone, but a scatter of calcined fragments, brittle as autumn leaves, arrayed in a circle no wider than a stake's base. Heart quickening, he signals his team. Brushes whisper across the soil, revealing 28 skulls, femurs fused in fetal curls, nails twisted like question marks. The air hangs heavy with peat and revelation. Davenport's hands tremble, unearthing a silver crucifix, melted but defiant, clutched in phalanges that once prayed. Radiocarbon dates, calibrated via accelerator mass spectrometry at the Max Planck Institute charcoal flex pegging to 1,585 to 1,590 align with Rothenburg's hunts, chronicled in the 1589 Taubergrund trials where 40 women, accused of Sabbath storms, met fire under Inquisitor Michael Double's gaze. What proved it? Isotopic analysis of teeth, strontium signatures, tracing diets of rye and river fish, profiles matching peasant midwives, not nobles. A molar's cavity, filled with beeswax, echoes Malleus marks, DNA strands, extracted via polymerase chain reaction in 2015 labs, yield mitochondrial haplogroups common to Franconian women, no demonic anomalies but human haplotypes, underscoring the hunt's banality. Discovered amid gravel for modern foundations, this pit dubbed the Witch's Ossuary, in 2016, publications forces confrontation. Not myth, but mortality, bones bearing the machine's tally. Why does this matter, this clutch of calcined truths clawed from clay? It bridges chasm to now, teaching that power's pathologies, fear's alchemy into atrocity, thrive in silences we allow. These women, reduced to malefici and ledgers, were weavers of worlds. Their herbs healed, their songs steadied, their independence irked the edifice. The hunts, per Levac's 2015 update, weren't aberration but architecture, misogyny's mortar-binding church and state amid Reformation rifts, claiming 80% women to enforce gendered enclosures. Psychological insights pierce. Roper's 2021 reassessment posits hunts as collective trauma response, post-plague psyches projecting chaos onto the carnal weak, echoing modern witch accusations in Papua New Guinea or India's Jharkhand, where 2024 studies log 150 annual assaults on sorceresses amid climate woes. Parallels proliferate. QAnon's spectral cabals, cancel culture's inquisitions, refugee panics, branding the displaced as demons, each a machine reboot, doctrine swapped for data. Remembering? Its resistance is root. These bones defy erasure. They demand we query. When does suspicion solidify into system? The ossuary proves resilience, nails unyielding, crucifixes clasped, reminding that erasure fails when Earth archives the erased. It's not theology's tale, but power's perennial ploy, to vanish the vulnerable, only for their vestiges to veto the victor's version. Redefine victory thus: they perished unnamed, but their remnants rally us. In 600 years, empires crumbled, but 28 women's unburnt essences endure. Ponder that resilience, and the warning sharpens. Unchecked, the machine rebuilds. Witnessed, it rusts. They were meant to vanish, these women, Walpurga and Murga, Anna and Dorothea, their names footnotes in ledgers led by lords who lit the flames. That was the blueprint. Torture to confess, confession to condemn, pyres to purify, their ashes scattered on winds that carried no witness. The machine whirred on, from Kramer's quill to Dornheim's pyres, devouring 50,000 souls across Europe's map, their stories scripted by the very inquisitors who silenced them. But they didn't dissolve into ether. They're etched in the unburnt, the 2014 ossuary's defiant bones, clutching crosses like final indictments. In the Vatican vault's mildewed transcripts, where a scrawled ego sum, innocence, in Walpurga's hand defies the notary's flourishes. In the folk ballads smuggled past censors, verses of green witches rising from rivers to rebuke the righteous. And now, they're here, with you in the screen's glow, the pages turn, the pause where reflection roots. Because you chose to linger. You chose to let their layers unfold, not as spectacle, but as summons. In doing so, you've become witness, and witnesses are the past's lifeline, the ones who refuse silence's finality, who graft ancient aches onto modern marrow. To witness is to wrestle with the Malleus's venom, still seeping in boardrooms where women pitch ideas only to be pricked for aggression. With the hunt's harvest, mirrored in refugee camps where witch brands the displaced. With the psychological scars, as 2024 Jharkhand studies reveal survivors haunted by stigma's slow bleed, much like Agnes's vacant gaze post-bridal. These stories matter because they map the machinery we inherit, fears forge, powers press, and arm us to dismantle it. We owe the past not pity, but praxis, to question doctrines that deem difference devilry, to amplify margins before they moulder, to remember that every erasure is an invitation to rebuild on broader ground. Their resistance? Not in revolt's roar, but in the quiet clutch a daughter's hand held through chains, a herb pressed in a hidden pouch, a nail's scratch defying the dark. In that, they left indelible, proof that even hammered flat, the spirit scores the stone. Maleficae non evanuerunt. Was ist die Silenci surgunt. The witches did not vanish. Voices rise from the silences. If this narrative stirred something, a chord of outrage, a whisper of wonder, a resolve renewed, linger in the comments below. What line lingered with you? Which woman's will echoed your own? What shadows in our time does this cast? These dialogues, these grapplings with the gloom, are the forge where history hones us against recurrence. If voices like theirs meant for muffling, yet murmuring still deserve daylight, subscribe. Not for accolades, but for the archives untold. Every buried broadside, every bone awaiting brush, every echo engineered to endure. Dornheim ruled 4 years, his hunts a template for every inquisitor, since from Salem's spectral judges to surveillance's silent scribes, the blueprint persists. But so does their refusal.